3 months. 3 months of nothing. Trained in Lyon. Trained in Manchester. And he still couldn't make rent in Abuja. Daniel Yoon stared at his phone screen one more time before the listing disappeared behind a dozen other open tabs. Private chef position. Immediate start. Full accommodation. Discretion required. A senator. In Asakoro. Needing a chef tonight. He dialed before he could talk himself out of it. The compound gates were taller than any house had a right to need. Cameras at every corner. A guard who patted him down twice before letting him through. My name is Daniel. I have an appointment, he told the woman at the front desk. Chef Daniel. Yes. One moment. This wasn't a restaurant referral interview. This was something closer to a government office. Marble floors, portraits on the walls, a silence so complete it pressed against his eardrums. You trained in Lyon? The senator's voice, when it came, was flat and unhurried. Yes, sir. For years. Then Manchester, 2 more. 6 years abroad. And yet you're here in my dining room, looking for work. Nigeria call me home, sir. That's all there is to it. Good. I need a man who doesn't run. If something feels off about this story already, that's because it's about to get a lot stranger. Stay with me to the end. And if stories like this pull you in, hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. Daniel Yoon was 31 years old, half-Korean on his mother's side, raised between Lagos and Seoul before his family settled permanently in Abuja when he was 12. He'd spent 6 years training under chefs in France and England who barely remembered his name, only to come home and discover that culinary pedigree meant nothing without capital, and capital meant nothing without connections he didn't have. He had exactly 40,000 naira in his account and a landlord who'd stopped pretending to be patient. The senator's name was Jonathan Adeyemi, 61 years old, 3-term lawmaker, a man whose face appeared on more campaign billboards in the Federal Capital Territory than any musician's did on a record sleeve. His personal assistant, a tall, unsmiling man named Bassi, handed Daniel a contract thick enough to be a small book. Everything is outlined, Mr. Yoon, Bassi said. Terms. Nadea. Boundaries. You will cook for this household, and this household only. You will not discuss anything you see or hear here with anyone outside the gate. Not friends. Not family. No one. How long is the initial contract period? Daniel asked. Mr. Yoon, the senator said, looking up for the first time, you are not working for me. You're living with me. This compound is your world now. Sign or don't. Daniel thought about his landlord. About the eviction notice folded in his back pocket. About 3 months of silence from every kitchen in the city that had once seemed impressed by his resume. He signed. The compound itself unsettled him before he'd even unpacked. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress with flower beds. 8 bedrooms, a separate staff wing, a kitchen larger than his last 3 apartments combined, and a quiet that sat over everything like a hell breath. So you're the new one, said a voice behind him as he carried his bag down the hallway. He turned to find a young woman, maybe 19, watching him with an expression caught between curiosity and pity. Good afternoon. I'm Daniel, the new chef. They always say chef like that, like it's just a job. Her tone had an edge he couldn't place. The last one said the exact same thing, the exact same way. What happened to the last chef? Asked Bassi. He handles all the disappearances. She walked away before Daniel could ask what she meant. Later that evening, he met the senator's wife, Adiz Adeyemi, elegant, soft-spoken, with eyes that flicked toward every doorway before she finished a sentence. You must be the new chef, she said. I hope you'll be comfortable here. I hope so too, Ma, Daniel answered, and meant it less with every passing hour. The kitchen, when he finally walked into it alone, told him more than anyone in that house had said out loud. It was too clean. Spotless counters, untouched pans, a refrigerator so empty it looked staged for a photograph nobody had taken yet. Nobody has cooked in here in a long time, Daniel thought. An entire senator's household, and there's nothing here. What has this family been eating? Tucked behind a spice rack, half hidden, he found a folded note in handwriting that wasn't his own. Watch the freezer room. 3 words, no signature. Daniel stood very still in the empty kitchen, the note trembling slightly in his fingers, and understood. Whoever had cooked here before him had been trying to warn whoever came next. If you're already hooked, you're not alone. Drop a like right now and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, because this story is about to get a lot more dangerous. Daniel's first morning began with eggs, fresh herbs from a garden nobody else seemed to use, and juice squeezed by hand because the kitchen had no working blender. "Good morning, Senator," he said, setting the tray down. Scrambled eggs, garden herbs, fresh juice. Jonathan studied the plate like he was inspecting evidence. "You found ingredients." "The garden, sir. Though the kitchen stock needs a full reorder. I've written a list. Bassie handles all the orders." "Give it to him." Jonathan paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "The last chef. Do you know why he left?" "No, sir. I wasn't told." "Good. You don't need to know." Walking back through the east corridor with his tray, Daniel noticed a door that hadn't appeared on the kitchen layout Bassie had shown him during orientation. Plain, unmarked, made of a different material than every other door in the hallway. No handed, an electronic keypad instead, glowing faint green in the dim light. "Watch the freezer room," the note had said. He reached out and touched the door surface. Cold radiated through even before his fingers made contact. "Not today, Mr. Yoon," Bassie said from somewhere behind him, voice low and even. "Not today." Daniel didn't turn around immediately. "I was just looking for the supply room. This corridor isn't on your route." A pause, deliberate and heavy. "Mr. Yoon, a word of advice. In this house you cook. That is all. You do not explore. You do not ask questions. The last chef forgot that. Eventually. Eventually what, Bassie?" Bassie only smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes, and walked away. That night, lying awake in the staff quarters, Daniel made a decision. "Not until I know," he thought. "Not until I know who made that note, and what they were so afraid of." By the third day, a pattern had revealed itself that troubled him more than a locked door. Every meal he cooked went out in identical portions. One pot, divided evenly, sent to every room in the house. The senator had been explicit about it on day one. Everybody eats the same food. One pot, one kitchen. No exceptions. But 2 plates kept coming back from Adi's room, completely untouched. "That's not a diet," Daniel murmured to himself, scraping cold jollof rice into the bin. "That's fear." The next morning, he carried Adi's breakfast tray up himself, instead of sending it with the house girl. "Good morning, Ma. I have your breakfast. May I come in?" A long pause behind the door. Then slowly it opened. "You brought it yourself?" "Every morning, Ma, until you tell me otherwise." She studied him with something between suspicion and desperate hope. "What did you make, Daniel?" "Oats, honey, banana. The same pot the senator had downstairs." "Sama pot, Ma. Everyone eats the same." Something in her shoulders loosened, just slightly. "Kumin, put it on the table." As he set the tray down, she added, almost too quietly to hear, "The chef before you, did he always bring food himself?" "I don't know about him, Ma. I only know what I do." He stopped bringing it himself, Adi said, staring at the wall. "Toward the end." "The end of what, Ma?" But she only thanked him for breakfast and looked away, and Daniel understood he wouldn't get more than that. Not yet. Walking back down the hallway, his chest tight with a feeling he didn't have a name for yet, he passed the young woman from his first day. Funmi, the senator's daughter, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. "You were just in my mother's room," she said. "It wasn't a question. It's my job. She let you in." She never let the last one in. Funmi's eyes narrowed slightly. "Everybody who walks into this house says they're just here to cook, Daniel. And then they start getting curious. What happened to the last chef, Funmi? He got too close to things that weren't his business. And then he was gone." Word of Daniel's visit to Adi's room reached Bassie within the hour, and Bassie reported it to the senator with the flat efficiency of a man delivering a weather forecast. "He delivered breakfast to your wife's room this morning, Senator." She let him in. Jonathan didn't look up from his newspaper. "Watch him more carefully." "Already done, Senator." What none of them knew was that Daniel had begun keeping his own record, a small notebook hidden inside a rolled chef's apron, where he wrote down everything that didn't add up. The locked door, the untouched plates, the way every member of staff flinched slightly whenever Bassie entered a room, the strange, persistent feeling that this house was holding its breath around some secret far larger than spoiled food or an unhappy marriage. On the 4th night, The crying started. It came faintly through the wall beside his room. A child's voice, muffled, frightened, definitely young. Daniel sat bolt upright in bed, certain he'd imagined it. Then it came again. Same wall. Same direction. That room. Bassie told me that room was storage. Storage doesn't cry. He pressed his ear to the wall, heart hammering. The crying continued, soft and exhausted, the sound of someone who had given up expecting anyone to come. Hello. Daniel whispered toward the wall. Is someone in there? I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Daniel. I'm the cook. You're not alone in there. Silence. Then, barely audible, who's there? Nobody you need to be afraid of, Daniel said, and pressed his palm flat against the cold wall, as if that alone might offer comfort through brick and plaster. The next morning, Adiz found him in the corridor before sunrise, her face drawn with exhaustion. You didn't sleep last night. Ich slept fine, ma. I heard you in the hallway before dawn, Daniel. You were awake too. She glanced both directions before lowering her voice further. The room next to yours. Do not ask about that room. Not to anyone. Margaret. Ma. Who was in that room? She hesitated so long Daniel thought she wouldn't answer at all. His name is Toby. He's 8 years old. 8 years old. Alone in there. Not always alone. I go when I can. Adiz's eyes filled, and she pressed her lips together hard. He's the senator's son, Daniel. You cannot tell anyone I told you this. I won't say a word. But Ma, someone needs to feed that child properly. Soft eggs. Banana. Something warm. Nobody told you to cook for him. Nobody needs to, Daniel said quietly. That same morning, he prepared a tray, soft scrambled eggs, sliced banana, warm tea, and carried it to the unmarked door himself. Toby, he said gently through the wood, my name is Daniel. I made you breakfast. I'm going to leave it right here by the door. You don't have to open it. It'll be waiting when you're ready. I'll come back in an hour. He paused, then added, you are not forgotten. Fummy found him on his way back to the kitchen. What was that tray doing outside that door, Daniel? Breakfast for whoever's in that room. You were told that room is storage. Storage doesn't need breakfast. He hasn't eaten properly in 3 days. Fun me. I know you know that. Her jaw tightened. If my father finds out you know about that room, he'll find out nothing from me. Why are you protecting this, Fun me? She didn't answer for a long moment. Why are you doing this, Daniel? Risking everything for a kid you don't even know. Because he's a child, Daniel said simply, and someone in this house needs to act like one of the adults actually remembers that. By that evening, Bassie had already reported the tray to the senator. Jonathan's response surprised everyone, including Bassie. He approved a daily tray for the room. No argument, no follow-up questions. He approved it too easily, Daniel said to himself afterward, pacing the kitchen. A man like the senator doesn't give ground without wanting something in return. Adiz confirmed his instinct that same night, finding him near the pantry. I heard he summoned you, and that he approved the daily tray for Toby. He approved it. That worries you, doesn't it, Ma? When Jonathan gives you something, Daniel, he is never simply giving. Her voice dropped to barely a breath. He wants to see what you do with the access. If this story has its hooks in you, now's the time to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next part is where everything starts coming apart. Drop a like and let me know in the comments. Would you have walked away by now or stay to find out the truth? By the 6th day, Daniel's notebook had grown thick with observations that troubled him more each time he reread them. Frozen goods kept arriving from outside suppliers. Strange, given that the house already had what was clearly an industrial-grade cold storage room, sitting and used behind a 6-digit lock. Why order frozen goods from outside? He wrote, when you have cold storage already inside. Unless that room was never meant for food at all. Toby had started eating everything Daniel sent up. Full plates, returned empty. A small victory that gave Daniel something to hold onto amid the rest of the house's quiet dread. He asked who was cooking. Fummy told him one afternoon, finally beginning to thaw toward him. I told him it was the new chef. And what did he say? He said, tell the chef thank you. Fummy's voice cracked slightly. He's a good boy, Daniel. He deserves better than what this house gives him. Daniel pressed her gently. Fun me, the freezer room. What's actually inside it? Don't ask me that. Nothing from that room has ever come to my kitchen in 6 days. Tell me quietly, then, if you won't tell me loud. Funmi glanced both directions down the hallway before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. Documents. What kind of documents? The kind that can bring down a senator. Daniel felt the floor tilt slightly beneath him. Documents that can end a senator's career, kept behind an industrial lock, refrigerated for years? Who else knows about this, Funmi? Nobody. And if Bassi finds out I told you? Good morning, Bassi said, appearing in the doorway as if summoned by his own name, and both of them froze. Funmi was just telling me Toby enjoyed his meals yesterday. Wasn't she? That's all we were discussing, Daniel said evenly. His appetite. Bassi studied him a moment too long. You're a very calm man, Mr. Yoon. Most people in this house become considerably less calm over time. I'm a chef, Basse. Calm is part of the job description. No, Bassi said slowly, eyes narrowing. You are not most people. That night, Daniel discovered the last chef's note had a postscript he'd missed. 6 small numbers pressed faintly into the paper beneath the ink, almost invisible unless held to the light. Not a date. A code. He stood in front of the freezer room's keypad at 2 in the morning, heart slamming against his ribs, fully aware that one wrong digit would lock the whole system and alert Bassi within seconds. God help me, he thought. Last chance. Either this opens or everything ends right here. The lock clicked. The door swung inward on a wave of refrigerated air. Inside, floor to ceiling on both sides, sat case after case of sealed file boxes, 40, 50, maybe more, each labeled in neat block lettering. Foundation accounts, 2009 to 2011. Land acquisition records. Senate committee files. These aren't just documents, Daniel realized, pulse roaring in his ears. These are evidence. Taped to the inside of the door, in handwriting that matched the original warning note exactly, were 3 words. Run. Don't cook. He was warning me, Daniel whispered. From the very beginning. He couldn't remove anything. The room was certainly monitored, and a missing box would be noticed instantly. But he could document. Working as fast as his hands would allow, he photographed every label, every visible date, every company name repeated year after year across what were unmistakably falsified land contracts and inflated construction tenders. He sealed the door exactly as he'd found it and walked, breath shallow, back toward the kitchen, straight into Bassi. Mr. Yoon, what were you doing near that corridor at this hour? I got turned around. It's a big compound, Bassi. Bassi's eyes dropped to Daniel's jacket. Your breath is cold. The corridor is cold, Daniel said, holding his voice steady through sheer will. Give me your phone. Daniel handed it over without hesitation, because the photographs weren't on the phone at all. He'd already transferred and deleted them through a backup app the moment he'd left the room, sending everything to an email account Bassi had never heard of. Bassi scrolled through an empty camera roll, kitchen shots, plated dishes, nothing else, and handed it back with visible, grudging frustration. Stay out of that corridor, Mr. Yoon. Of course, Bassi. I will be watching you every second. You always have been, Daniel said quietly, and walked away before his hands could start shaking where Bassi might see. 2 days later, a car with government plates pulled through the compound gates, and within hours, the senator had Daniel's entire history laid out on his desk like a hand of cards. Silas Daniel Yoon, Jonathan said, correcting himself with a thin, humorless smile. Born Port Harcourt, trained Lion, Manchester, and before all that, Lagos 2019. Head chef for a businessman named George Ease. Daniel said nothing. George's residence was raided by the EFCC that same year. Financial crimes investigation. You were questioned. Jonathan looked up slowly, and you cooperated fully. You provided evidence from inside that household. I did my job, Senator. This is not simply a chef, Bassi, Jonathan said, not looking away from Daniel. Is it? No, Senator, Bassi said. He's not. That evening, Funmi found Daniel in the kitchen, her face pale. There's a man in my father's office. Government plates outside. Daniel, they're investigating you. I know. You knew they'd find Lagos. In Lagos, Daniel said, setting down his knife, I work for a man who is using his household exactly the way this compound is being used now. I documented everything. I gave it to the right people. You came here knowing this would happen. I came here broke, fund me. But yes, when I saw what this house actually was, I knew exactly what I had to do. Bassie told my father to remove you today. Today, Daniel. Then I need to move faster than they expect. That night, Adiz found him near the pantry one final time, her composure entirely gone, replaced by something fierce and resolved. I know about Lagos, Daniel. Then you know what I'm capable of. I know what you did to George E's, she said. And I want you to do the exact same thing here. You understand what that means, Ma? For your husband. For this family's name. I have understood it for years, Adiz said. Daniel, Toby has no father in that room. He has a warden. I need one thing from you, Daniel said. I need into the senator's private study, alone tonight. His personal files. Everything the freezer room doesn't already hold. After dinner, Adiz said, I'll make sure the study is clear. That night's dinner service passed with unnerving normalcy. Jonathan complimenting the rice, Bassie watching Daniel's every movement with open suspicion, Funmi pushing food around her plate without eating. The moment the dining room cleared, Daniel slipped into the darkened study and began photographing everything within reach. Offshore account statements, 18 separate land titles, a list of Senate contract awards that cycled through the exact same 3 companies year after year after year. He didn't hear Bassie's footsteps until they were directly behind him. Mr. Yoon, what are you doing outside the senator's study at this hour? Looking for the senator, to ask about tomorrow's menu. At this hour, Mr. Yoon? Bassie demanded the phone again. Kamerarol, kitchen. More kitchen. Plate of dishes. Nothing else, because everything had already left the building since the moment Daniel stepped out of the study, routed through the same backup channel as before. I told you, Bassie, Daniel said, voice perfectly level despite his racing pulse. I'm a chef. Nothing else. By morning, every photograph, the freezer room, the study, 6 days of handwritten notes, sat safely with a journalist Daniel had trusted with the full account since day 4. If you've made it this far, you already know this story is heading somewhere big, so don't scroll away now. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't, and stay with me, because the truth is about to walk straight into that house. I've called this breakfast, Jonathan announced the next morning, seated at the head of a table set for 5, because I believe in transparency. Since when, Father? Funmi asked. We're waiting for one more person, Jonathan said, and a moment later, Daniel walked in and took the seat that had clearly been left empty for him. You worked for George E's in Lagos, 2019, Jonathan said without preamble. Yes, Senator, and you provided evidence against him. I did my job in Lagos, Senator, exactly as I've done it here. I'm a chef. I cook. I observe. I document. Everything I've seen in this compound, I have written down, every detail, every number. And where is this writing now, Daniel? Already outside this compound, Senator, with someone I trust. Since last night. Bassie moved toward the door. Jonathan raised a hand without looking at him. See, Bessie. Adiz stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. Jonathan, I have something to say. I have been afraid in this house for 3 years. Afraid to eat. Afraid to speak. Afraid to leave a room without permission. You told me I was imagining things, that I was unwell. I was not unwell, Jonathan. I was watching everything you did in this house, every single day. And now someone else has been watching too. And he wrote all of it down. You think you can simply walk into my house and, Jonathan started. It's not just your house, Father, Funmi cut in. It's Toby's house too. It has gone far enough, Senator, Bassie said suddenly, and every head at the table turned toward him. I said it has gone far enough. All of you, Jonathan said, his voice rising for the first time, in my own house. Senator, Daniel said quietly, the notebook is already outside. The photographs are already sent. This isn't an ultimatum. It's already done. How long? Jonathan demanded. How long have you been watching me? Since day 4, Senator. The kitchen sees everything. Adiz was already standing, already reaching for Funmi's hand. I should have walked out of this house 2 years ago. She looked at her husband one final time. We are walking out now. The car is waiting at the gate, Daniel said. A barrister is expecting you. Toby comes too. That part is not negotiable. It's already in the file we sent, Funmi added, finding her voice fully for the first time. Foundation accounts. Land titles. Everything you try to keep frozen, father. We have it all. Jonathan said nothing. There was nothing left for him to say. 3 weeks later, Daniel stood in a small, sunlit kitchen, far smaller than the one he'd left behind, but his own, preparing breakfast for 3 people instead of a household that had spent years pretending to be one. Adiz sat at the table, calmer than Daniel had ever seen her. Funmi laughed at something Toby said. The boy's face fuller now, his laughter no longer muffled behind a locked door. All I did was cook, Daniel said quietly, setting the plates down. No, Adiz said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. You fed a family that had forgotten what being fed even meant. If this story moved you, you know what to do. Hit that like button, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and subscribe so the next story finds you before you even have to look for it. Because somewhere out there, someone else is still waiting for their own chef to walk through the door.